Welcome to The Lost Traveler. I'm your host, Henry Cameron Allen. And today we have a very special guest indeed, Tammy McVeigh. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, Henry. Thank you so much for having me.
So great to have you. Now, we are new acquaintances, and I was looking at your website and checking out all the things that you are, which is kind of an amazing list. You're a former U.S. Marine Corps corporal. You're the CEO of your company. You're a speaker and a high performance mentor. And of course, the most important thing is that you're a dog lover. And that's very special to me because of my beautiful flat Stanley.
Yes, I've had quite a dynamic life.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, so I went into the Marine Corps when I was 17, and I enlisted on New Year's Eve, of all things. And so I spent 4 years, and at such a young age, it really shaped who I am. And so since then, I've just taken a lot of risks in my life and tried new things. And so I went on to work for an engineering firm for 20 years as a software developer. And about 6 years ago, I decided I wanted to do my own thing. And so I started my own business, traveling around the world and helping entrepreneurs.
That's fantastic. What compelled you to join the Marines at age 17? I didn't even know that was possible.
Well, of course, you enlist, and then I waited until I graduated high school. But the military had always intrigued me, and I wanted to serve my country. And I didn't come from a family with a lot of money. And so to me, college was this big, expensive thing that I needed to know exactly what I wanted. And it didn't feel like a real option for me. And so I started looking at the military. I wanted to go into the Air Force, and the Air Force recruiter told me that I could be a secretary or a cook. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And then the Marines, I thought they were crazy guys. I didn't even think about women in the Marine Corps. And I met my boyfriend in high school. His sister was a Marine, and she came to visit, and she was stationed in Hawaii, and she was pretty, and she was having fun. And I thought, I can do that. And so I joined the Marine Corps.
Amazing. Wow. And it took you on quite a journey and showed you the world, I imagine.
Actually, I really didn't travel too much when I was actually in the Marine Corps. I was stationed down at Camp Pendleton, and we did some exercises. My unit was one of the first to go to Desert Storm, but they went so quickly, they said no women in combat. And so there were about 12 of us that stayed behind. And so I never went. And it was only once I moved to Colorado, where I got around some adventurous friends, that I actually started to travel. Because like I said, I didn't grow up with money. So to me, travel was never on my radar.
Right, only in books or movies. I mean, I had the opposite experience. My father was a cultural diplomat for the U.S. Information Agency, and so from an early age, I was traveling. And what I longed for was the Frank Capra "It's a Wonderful Life," small town, know everybody your whole life, kind of an experience, which I never had. So it's really interesting to hear about somebody who makes that kind of a shift. And as you say, takes a risk to step out into the world. I think that's something that we're all reflecting on right now. When are we going to be able to do that again? Right?
I know. As somebody who loves to travel, I take several trips every year. And so to think like, wow, what if I can't do that for the next year or two? What would that look like? And so it's definitely making me question my next moves.
How do you think, I mean, the subject we're tackling today is being open to the opportunity to pivot, right? To
Yeah.
make a paradigm shift in your life, I imagine is what that indicates. Is that accurate or?
Yes, like when I look at like I have had a dynamic life, but when I look at when I made those big changes, it was always when something else got in the way. And so, like right now, I have my own business working from home, and we're all forced to stay at home. So in a lot of ways, it feels the same, but it really is a chance to go a new direction if I want to, or other people also have these circumstances come up that they're just like, you know what, I got laid off from that job, but I never really liked it to begin with,
I hear a lot of people saying that they're really thinking about this time as being one that is ripe for reinvention, right? And the whole purpose for this podcast, The Lost Traveler, is to start the dialogue, which I'm not hearing anywhere else really, outside of the mentoring circles or life coaching, things like that, to think about the skills that we need to develop now immediately to meet this time, but also to meet the future, to be able to and this future that's so uncertain. None of us knows what's going to happen a week from now. And how do you think we we gain those skills to know when the right time is to pivot, whether the time is right to reinvent, just sort out for ourselves what is worth keeping and hanging on to, and what is an old tape or old routine that may be best on the shelf.
Yes, I think that, I know right now there's also a lot of people that are really overwhelmed with their situation. They're homeschooling and, stuck at home with all the family and also trying to still work. Some people are still working. So I know it can be really challenging for a lot of people, but I think taking that pause to just take inventory of what you bring to the table. When I was a software developer, I could put my head down and write code all day long, but I have so many more skills than that. And so the thing that I've loved about starting my own business is I can pull in all of those things. If I want to talk about personal development with my clients, I can. If I want to talk about tech with my clients, I can. And so I was really just aware of what I brought to the table. And so I think starting with that inventory. And then the second thing that's really served me is just keeping an open mind. When I look at all the different cool adventures I've done over the years, so many things I just said yes to when I didn't feel prepared. It just sounded cool. And so I think the same thing can apply to career and business, is that if you're feeling this ache for something different, to really start just paying attention to see what's out there and look in places that you've never looked at before, and just allowing yourself to just be open to something totally different that may not be on your radar right now.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with somebody just this morning about how, it seems on the one hand that, we're hearing about all the death and all the uncertainty and the division that we're still experiencing politically in the country, and everyone's feeling, as you say, overwhelmed with, how do I survive right now? There's this real fear, and that's important to acknowledge that is real, that people are living with that fear. On the other hand, it's a golden opportunity in human history that we've not experienced in generations, to be able to take a half step back and go within and think about, who I've been, how I've treated others, what I've put into the world, right? And last week's podcast was in honor of my son Cameron, who passed away from brain cancer at age 13, and he at 13 was conscious that he was able to leave a legacy behind. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to think about just that. And that's exactly what you're saying, is what is the legacy I want to leave, right? By what I'm doing in the world, what I'm projecting out into the world and affecting in the world.
Yes. And I also see that people don't really see themselves as that powerful. Like when you think of legacy, it's easy to immediately go to people like Martin Luther King Jr. And so you can't compare yourself to somebody like that, but simple kindness and how you're showing up right now in this moment can make all the difference. Like if you're one that's just contributing to all the fear and you're sharing all the news and complaining about this or that, like people are going to remember that too. And so it's how do you want to look back on this time and think like, I'm really proud at how I showed up during that crazy time. Because like you said, we've never been through this before. And even though I happen, years and years ago, we're also in a different age of technology. And so to have all that information feeding into our heads constantly, it can make it really difficult to just pause and listen to your own voice.
Well, and also it does have an effect of making the gap even wider between us. When we have family and friends who are those people who are projecting the fear and projecting the division and all of that into the world, it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It means that they're feeling what they're feeling. Their feelings are absolutely valid, and they have a platform to be able to share those things, which they absolutely should be able to share those things freely. For me, and I would love to know what you think about this. I've been sitting with this image of sort of a great cosmic radio. We all have a frequency that we project out and a frequency that we tap into and receive. And when we're in the mood for a certain kind of music or a certain kind of talk radio, we turn the dial until we find the frequency that we vibe with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't find the right frequency that sits well with us, then we turn the dial until we find the right one, right? And it may just be for a song, or it may be for a whole hour of one particular artist, right? Do you think that that's something that people can understand at large and become aware of in terms of that pivot? It's exactly what it is. It's pivoting that dial until you find your particular frequency that you match with.
Yes, like you said, people are going to feel they want to feel, and there's, that's the human in all of us. And so if you're feeling a certain way, then you have to keep, like you said, changing that dial till you can find your people and your tribe that you can feel safe with, and you can connect and share those common messages with. And I definitely believe that we are all energy. I talk about it all the time. And, for somebody who was a software developer, very logical left brain, I'm also very aware of, the energy and some of the things that people may consider woo-woo. But, one of the easiest ways that I can describe energy to people that have a hard time wrapping their head around it is like if you've ever walked into a room after somebody was arguing and they're not arguing anymore, but you can just feel the tension in the air. Like you just know something's off. And so you're like, whoa, should I leave? Or same thing, you walk into a room and somebody was just making out. You're like, am I interrupting? Like even though nothing's happening. And so we have these senses all the time that we're picking up on. And right now it's, even though we're all in our own little islands at home, the energy that we're feeling just from the inputs we're getting from social media and TV and having Zoom calls with our loved ones, it's still very alive and well. And just being recognizing of what you're putting out and what you're receiving is definitely helpful.
I think it's also a good time to reflect back on programming and on the old tapes that keep playing in our heads that may not be serving us anymore, especially when we're thinking about things like career and we're thinking about how we're going to be moving forward. And those of us that have lost an income because our industry tanked, or because, people who have to diminish their hours and therefore their income, people who already are struggling earning a living. I remember back, I don't remember what age I was. It must have been 7th or 8th grade, or maybe even 9th grade. We had guidance counselors. Do you remember guidance counselors in school?
Yes.
And it was a requirement. You had to go in and sit with the guidance counselor, and they'd ask you a bunch of questions, right? And then they would tell you what you should be. Right? They would give you advice on, you should go into this career with your interests and with your talents and with your intellect, right?
Yeah.
It was usually one or two things, but we're so much more complex than that, aren't we?
Absolutely.
But do you think that today we especially people in their 40s and 50s, do you think that we still put ourselves in those tiny boxes and limit ourselves in that way?
Oh, definitely. Like when I was a software developer and I was just having this ache for a change, all I could think about was, well, if I quit this job, I'm just going to be a software developer at another company. Like I couldn't see past those blinders. And so then it's like, well, why switch companies when I have, good benefits here and I have flexibility here? So I kept talking myself out of it. And ironically, it wasn't until I was selected to be on Colorado State grand jury for a year that I was listening to all these different cases. And I realized how much my just analytical skills applied to across all these different industries. And so it was such a gift for me. And so I think that really having that self-awareness of really what makes you tick, what you like, what intrigued you, but you never really pursued. I think all those things are just really great to explore right now. And we're in this place where you don't have to do anything about it. Like you don't have to make a decision, but let yourself dream like, well, what would it look like if this, or what would it look like if I went back and I took this class? And so just start to look at some of those different possibilities.
And we're going to take a brief pause right now to hear a word from our sponsor. Feel well, live well. Vox Life combines neuromuscular science with decades of proven research to help you achieve your wellness goals. Safe for all ages, drug-free, and with no invasive treatments, Vox Life products use the patented Vox HPT, a special tactile pattern that activates your body's neuroreceptors to reduce aches and pains, keeping you at maximum performance every day. The new Neurovax Patch Immune System Optimizer is on special through April 27th. Visit dianedinkmeyer.voxlife.com for details. That's Vox Life, VOXX Life.
There are so many classes that are available for free, university level at Yale and Harvard. MIT has a bunch of free classes. There are other places as well. Facebook is starting to grow all of these wonderful groups and Zoom calls. I'm actually joining one for drawing. I haven't, I studied visual art years ago out of high school, but I haven't revisited drawing, which is a passion of mine. I love to doodle and draw my whole life. And now I have the time to pursue those things. It doesn't cost any money. It's getting together with like-minded people and people who are masters at what they do. How do you think that there's no such thing as normal or average, in my opinion, but somebody who may be struggling with all of these concepts, right? How do I break through my overwhelm and out of this shell and burn those old tapes that are holding me back? How do I break through right now and start that process? Because I think there are going to be a lot of people listening who are scared and have no idea. They lack the skills to be able to move forward. They're petrified right now. How do we help them move through that and break through?
Well, there's a saying in the Marine Corps: improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I think that many times we get ourselves locked into this, that if I make this decision to go down this path and then it's wrong, then I just ruined everything. So I think just recognizing that you can always make a new decision. And so if you take this drawing class and all of a sudden you're really enjoying it, and so then it leads you to the next step, and then the next step, and next thing you know, you decide to switch careers and do that. That's up to you. But by you saying yes to taking this drawing class, if you just enjoy a couple of hours with people that think the same way, then that was fine enough. And so I think we add so much pressure to ourselves that it has to be the perfect right decision. And we make up all these stories in our head of all the things that are going to go wrong. I know that when I wanted to leave my corporate career, I kept thinking like, well, what if I lose my house? And it was so ridiculous and so far from the truth. And I know that some people are really in some dire straits right now, but I think really just asking yourself how much of what you've done has been because somebody else wanted you to do it. I think being in your 40s and 50s, there's this comfort with who you are, and you start to recognize that maybe you went down this path because you had your college degree in it and it just felt natural to get a career in that. But I know that I was having this ache that I was stifling the best parts of me. And I didn't have an outlet for that in my current position. And so I knew I had to make some kind of change.
Permission is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And forgiveness. Like if give myself permission to go down this route. And if it's not what I like, or I'm really not enjoying it, or it's not what I thought it was, because I've done that too, to forgive myself for making that decision, because it really wasn't a bad decision. It's life. It's all life. And I think that if you allow yourself to look at it like a journey, and just, there's bumps along the journey, and that just makes you more dynamic in who you are.
And we're both mentors. This is something that we're passionate about. This is something that we're the helpers in the world, right? We're trying to help people with these breakthroughs. And one thing that I hear a lot from my clients is, well, that's how I was raised. Do you hear that a lot?
Sometimes I have people that, they reflect on their childhood all the time. For me, like, I really just look at it like, what was the lesson I was supposed to learn in that? And then to move forward and not to keep looking backwards, because we're not going that direction.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think a reflection is important, but I think it's also important to understand that you're not being raised that way now, and that you are in control of yourself with a capital S, and that every one of us has that inner child still in there, right? But guess who gets to parent that child? We do, right? We get to parent our inner child, the one that's still in there, still scared, still confused, maybe more so now, right? How would we advise that child if it were outside of us, right? How would we comfort and advise? And so I think that this is one of the reasons that I focus a lot on life skills, these essential life skills that every human being, what is it, 7.7 billion on the planet, learns in life. It doesn't matter what culture you come from, or what socioeconomic background you come from, your religious background, none of it matters. We're all learning the exact same life skills, but on different levels, right? Different capacities. And where do you feel that you learned your life skills from, those essential life skills? That's a question I like to ask.
Oh, good question. Well, so I grew up with a single mom. And when I look at my independence and just the way I live my life, in a lot of ways, she was like that, because she was, very strong and having to do what needed to be done to raise kids. But I went through this exercise where, instead of looking at my mom, like up on this pedestal, I just looked back to what, like, the age I was at, she was at the time she was raising me. And I looked at her as a woman and the decision she was making as a woman. And it made me realize that a lot of the advice that she was giving me was coming from those fears that she had. And they weren't necessarily right. My story that I had attached to anymore. For example, like, she was really excited that I was going in the Marine Corps. She wanted me to travel, even though she didn't. And she was always afraid of it. So anytime, like, I wanted to go to Mexico for my senior trip, and my mom didn't want me to go to Mexico. So as much as she wanted it, she also had this struggle. And she didn't want me to get married and have kids. And as I got in my 40s and I started to look at that story, I just realized it was because she had had kids at such a young age and didn't have that kind of life. And so she wanted those things for me, because that was something she had dreamed about. And so it kind of gave myself just this opening, that it wasn't that I didn't deserve having a family or kids. It was a choice that I made. And this is the reason why I was thinking that way. And it was a really powerful exercise.
Yeah. And, most of the people that I've interviewed about life skills, they will say something very similar, that I didn't feel that I learned directly from my parents, but I learned by observing them and seeing their motivations and their I don't like to use the word mistakes because I don't believe in them, but I think, they're lessons. Most parents are deficient and admittedly in the life skills that they are expected to teach. That's indeed the only source that we turn to as an expectation to actively teach life skills in the foundation years. And schools are not equipped either, for the most part, to teach essential life skills. And by that, I'm talking about communication skills and financial literacy and emotional skills and, down the line, nutrition. And these are things that we learn by observing and by experimentation. I think now we have tools, as you were saying earlier, with the internet to be able to find answers in a way that we've never been able to before, right? And if we don't find it, we can put it in there. And that's a cool thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the more I think about those life skills that, along the way, we're always learning. And our childhood might have shaped that foundation, but there were a lot of gaps. Like we all had gaps. And so it's what you do to fill those gaps and where you're getting that information from. And so I was also fortunate that when I moved to Colorado in my early 20s, I remember this older woman I had worked with, and she said, never take financial advice from a broke person. And for whatever reason, that just stuck. And so I started to pursue personal finance all on my own, just so I could make sure that I was learning what I needed to know. And so I think.
And where did you go? Where did you go? I mean, when you had that impulse, where did you turn? Because nobody was pointing you in that direction.
Yeah,
right?
I don't even know what got me started. First, I started to listen to Susie Orman, and I know she's really conservative with finances, but it gave me this foundation. And then I just started to, I just pick things up pretty quickly. So I'm lucky in that regard. And so I just started to pay attention, and then I was investing and I was seeing what was working and what wasn't. And just reading books along the way or blog articles, Motley Fool, things like that. And so, yeah. And so I think it's just that same thing. It's just like keeping that open mind, keep reading until something sounds like it really clicks for you. And, it may be wrong information, but then when you make that error, then you learn and you make sure you don't do it again. So.
Exactly. And trust your gut. Right? If something feels right to you, then it probably is. If something doesn't feel right to you, it's probably not.
Right?
Yeah,
so I think that we tend to ignore our gut instinct all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you think that is? How do people break through that impulse? Because that's worldwide.
Well, so I think that, and this may come from my Marine Corps background too, but I think that people are truly afraid of their own power. And so if they have this gut instinct that something's off, to speak up and put their foot down and say like, no, this is what I believe and this is the direction I'm going, is really uncomfortable, especially if you're married and your spouse isn't on board, or your parents want you to do one thing, or there's other people that are impacted. People are afraid to really make that decision because now they're impacting other people. And so they're afraid to say that this is my gut instinct that's telling me this, because they don't want to be wrong. We are afraid of judgment on some level, and we want to be accepted and we want to have that connection. And so to be really strong and stand in who you are and what you believe and going after the things you want and creating the life that you want to have, it takes a lot of courage, and it's something that you have to constantly work on and build. And, some days you won't feel so brave, and then the next you're going to go for it. And so it's just this constant ebb and flow, but it's that consistency of building that courage.
More with Tammy McVeigh right after this brief message from our sponsor. 21st century life skills warrant 21st century education. Every human being is born into a classroom, each of us given the same homework, the same core assignments. personal care skills, emotional literacy, financial literacy, environmental literacy. These and other essential life skills are unique, learned and used by each of us every day of our lives. Indeed, they are the common thread in our humanity, core to individuals and the communities they construct, surviving and thriving. Raising the bar on life skills education for all. This is the mission of Parenting 2.0. Visit www.parenting2pt0.org for more information. Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you.
And every moment has an infinite, what I call a peacock tail of possibilities surrounding it. Every single moment, right? And all we have to choose is to go from the point of time and space that we're in to a point B. Just pick one. Pick the one that you feel in your gut is the right way to go. And if you arrive there and you're not feeling good, you're not feeling safe, you're not feeling comfortable, guess what? That moment is also surrounded by an infinite peacock tail of possibility, and you get to choose another direction to go in, right? That is our power. And I think a lot of people, the fear of one's own power is something that I hear talked about a lot, and I think it's absolutely right. It also takes recognizing that you are powerful to have that fear. And I think a lot of people are missing that piece too, to understand exactly how powerful indeed each of us is individually. Go ahead.
Yes, like it really ties in what we were talking about making that decision and then knowing you can always make a new decision. And like one example for me is I was unhappy. I wasn't in the shape I wanted to be in. So I decided to hire a personal trainer. That was one decision. The woman I was working with, she was a ball of fire. She got me really excited about health and fitness. So I decided to get my personal trainer certification. That was another decision. But then I knew in my gut, I didn't really want to be getting up at 5 a.m. and training people before I went to my corporate job. So I had this thing that I wasn't really doing anything with. It was more for my own knowledge. And then when I started my business, I pulled that in, but then I found I wasn't really enjoying it. And so I ended up just scrapping the whole wellness side of things in my business. And so, each step along the way, I was evaluating, like I was looking at that peacock tail and figuring out like I could do this with it, or I could do this with it, or I can choose not to do anything with it. And that's ultimately what I did.
And that could be really frustrating and overwhelming too, to know that there's an infinite amount of possibilities, right?
Oh, yeah.
In order to make that pivot. And so with the next, 10 minutes or so that we have left, let's talk a little bit about practical tools that people can walk away from this podcast episode with that can help them sort of gauge in a safe way in this fearsome and fearful world that we're in right now, this uncertain future. How do we empower them to pivot freely and turn that dial and follow a path of their own choosing? How do we do that right now?
I think that to, look at that peacock tail that's right in front of you and start evaluating, like look at like, what are the pros and cons of each direction that you could possibly go, and ask yourself, like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, I know when I wanted to start my business, I was really afraid because I was walking away from something I'd been at for 20 years. And all of a sudden my best friend said, what's the worst that happens? You get another IT job. And for some reason, that was like a big light bulb that went off for me. And so I think to look at that, each route that you could go down in this moment and think, okay, well, what is the worst that could happen? And look at it from a factual place, not necessarily I'm going to lose everything, because you're going to pivot somewhere along the way if things start going south. So I think just the good old fashioned pros and cons list is really the best. And then to take your time, like to do that, get all the information out of your head and then go for a walk. Like, just think about it and let yourself dream. Like, what would it really feel like in that? Because we forget that how we feel is such an important part of our happiness. And so to think, what would it feel like if I were doing that thing?
Absolutely. The imagination is limitless. And that is, I think, the gift of this time, all of the hard stuff aside, right, that we're all struggling with and we're all fearful of. The gift in all of this is that we have this moment to engage in our limitless imagination in a way that we might not have been afforded. I'm in a creative world, and so I'm surrounded by imaginative people who are always thinking outside the box. But I think most people are not. I think we are all creative. I just don't think that we are all proficient in the ability to engage with that inherent creative spirit that each human being has. I like you, I always come back to evaluating what's the worst that can happen if I take a risk. For me, the worst that could happen to me has happened, right? And that's my measuring stick for everything that came afterwards, right? If I could survive the loss of my only child as a single father and move beyond and through, right? Then bring it. I can get through anything, right? So I encourage those people listening right now who are sitting with this question of how to break through and how to move forward to really think about and reflect on your past. Yes, we can't go back. There's no time machine to take us back into the past, except for our imagination. And we can go back and we can revisit a moment and evaluate what's the worst that has ever happened to me in my life, and use that as the measuring stick for everything that's going to come. You survived that, right? Everything that's happened to you in your life, you have survived 100%. And the odds are pretty good in your favor that you'll survive whatever life brings you next. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because the thing is like when things don't go your way and you're really in the muck, it doesn't feel good, but those are the things that make you stronger than ever. And so when things start to go well and some challenges come up, you can handle them like a champ. But I think that we all have to, look at those moments as gifts, because you made it through and it's made you who you are. And just knowing that if you make a decision and it's not quite what you wanted, then you're tough as nails and you'll just make a new decision.
And you can also ask for help if you get lost. There are so many ways to ask for help, right? To seek guidance. My son used to say, Cameron, he used to say, if you want something and you don't ask for what you want, you have 100% chance of not getting it. But if you ask for what you want, then you at least have a 50% chance of getting it. And aren't those much better odds?
Yes. And the thing is like right now, like people, for the most part, they want to see you succeed. I know that, we all have some challenging people in our lives, but for the most part, they want to see you succeed. And so if you're just like, hey, this is the thing I really want, and here's how I need help. Can you, or does somebody, or could possibly help me or have a conversation? And so I think we're afraid to do that. But the beautiful thing about this happening on such a global scale right now is that so many people are considering making huge changes. And so what you decide to do isn't going to stand out that much. It's not going to shock people if all of a sudden you decide to go down an entirely different career path.
Yeah. Yeah. We're flattening the curve in many ways, more ways than one. Not just with regard to this virus, but also with regard to the world consciousness, and those of us who are, sitting in this place of looking at the whole thing, saying, "Wow, this is leveling the playing field a little bit, isn't it?"
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I think that it's all taking us back to our roots of just that pure human feeling, emotion, connection, sitting at home, all these things that, before we really looked at exploring the world at large through social media or through actually traveling, that we're at our roots right now and we're forced to reflect on our lives and our situation is, it's a beautiful gift. It really is.
I agree with you. And with that, I would love for you to share your website and how people can get in touch with you if they want to reach out and ask for help and ask for guidance through your
Of course.
work.
So my website is tammymcvay.com. So it's TAMIMCVAY. And I'm on all the social media channels. I primarily hang out on Facebook. And so it's just Tammy McVay Mentor over there.
Wonderful. Well, one mentor to another. I really appreciate your taking the time to come and be on The Lost Traveler and join this adventure.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your message and what you're doing. And so it was an honor to be a part of it.
Thanks, Tammy. And
Okay,
we'll be
you.
in touch very soon.
You've been listening to The Lost Traveler with Henry Cameron Allen. For more information, please visit www.henryallen.org. Thanks so much for tuning in, and let's all keep striving for a better world. Thank you.